You asked what's in the Hollow Creek file. All of it. So tonight we play everything. 3 tapes. In the order the town lived them. Turn the lights off. If anything calls your name before the end, you know the rule. Count to 30. There's a radio station in Hollow Creek that's been off the air since 1986. Last Tuesday at 3:11 in the morning, my clock radio turned itself on and tuned to it. I should explain something about Hollow Creek first. It's the kind of town you only find by missing a turn. One diner, one church, one traffic light that's blinked yellow since before I was born. And on the ridge above the reservoir, a rusted radio tower nobody ever tore down. The station was called WKHC, 88.9 FM. My grandfather worked there as a night engineer until the winter it closed. He never told anyone why it closed. When people asked, he'd just say the same 7 words. We stopped broadcasting. Something else didn't. I moved back to Hollow Creek in March, into his old house, after he passed. Most of his things were already boxed. But in the basement, on a workbench under a sheet of dust thick as felt, I found his radio. A hand-built receiver, heavy as a car battery, with a strip of masking tape above the dial. On the tape, in his handwriting, "Do not tune past 88.7. I want to tell you I respected that. I want to tell you I unplugged it and went to bed. But it was 3 a.m., I couldn't sleep, and the tape was 40 years old. So I turned the dial. 88.8 was static. Ordinary static, like rain on a tin roof. 88.9 was breathing. Not static that sounded like breathing. Breathing. Slow, patient, close. The way it sounds when someone's mouth is almost touching the microphone. I sat there with my hand still on the dial, telling myself it was interference, a heartbeat of some far-off signal skipping over the mountains. Then the breathing stopped, and a voice, flat, careful, like it was reading from a card, said, "Thank you for tuning in. We've held your grandfather's slot open." I unplugged the radio. I need you to understand that. I pulled the cord out of the wall, and the dial light stayed on for 4 more seconds. Long enough for the voice to finish. Same time tomorrow. I didn't sleep. In the morning I did what anyone would do. I drove to the library and pulled everything on WKHC. Most of it was nothing. Ad rates. A charity drive. But in the January 1986 microfilm, I found a wire story 4 paragraphs long. 3 employees of WKHC had gone missing during a single overnight shift. The night DJ, the receptionist, and a maintenance man. The transmitter had kept running for 9 hours with no one in the building. When the sheriff finally cut power at dawn, the tape reels were still turning. They were recording, not playing. The station never reopened. My grandfather was the one who found the empty studio. He was also, and the article said this like it meant nothing, the one who refused to ever play the recording. That night I sat in the kitchen with coffee I didn't drink, watching the basement door. I'd left the radio unplugged. I'd left it in pieces, actually. I took the back off and pulled the tubes out with my own hands. At 3:11 a.m., from under the floorboards, softly, in my grandfather's voice, the radio said, "You're late for your shift." Here's the thing about small towns. You can't ask for help without the whole town knowing by lunch. So I asked the only person who wouldn't talk, Pastor Ellison, who's 91 and buried most of the people in this town, including the 3 names from that article. Except, he told me, they never buried anyone. There was nothing to bury. But your grandfather figured out how to keep it quiet, he said. Every night, 3 a.m., he drove up to that station and sat in the booth till dawn. 40 years, near enough. Never missed a night. Never told a soul what he did up there. I asked him what happens if nobody sits the shift. The pastor looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "It starts auditioning." Last night, every radio in Hollow Creek turned on at 3:11 a.m. The diners, the churches, the one in my truck, with the fuse removed. One frequency, One voice, patient as ever. Auditions are now open. Thank you all for listening. We know you are. We can hear every one of you breathing. I'm writing this from the parking lot below the tower. The building's dark except one window, the booth. My grandfather kept this town safe for 40 years, one night at a time, and I finally understand his 7 words. We stopped broadcasting. Something else didn't. The shift starts in 10 minutes. If you ever drive through Hollow Creek at night, do me one favor. Keep your radio off. This is tape number 1. If I'm still here next week, there'll be a tape number 2. That was tape 1. The station never did sign off, as far as anyone can prove. 8 years after that broadcast, on the same road, a boy learned what the signal had been practicing for. This is tape 2. Every kid in Hollow Creek knew the rule about sleeping over at Danny Whitlock's house. Danny told you himself, before you even rolled out your sleeping bag. If my mom calls your name after midnight, don't answer her. Count to 30. She'll stop. We all thought it was a joke. In October of 1994, in Danny's bedroom on Reservoir Road, I found out it wasn't. I was 11. Danny was my best friend, the kind you make in a town like Hollow Creek, where there's one school, one diner, and nothing to do after dark except be kids together. His house sat last on Reservoir Road, backed up against the tree line, close enough to the water that on quiet nights you could hear it move. His mom, Mrs. Whitlock, was the nice one. Every mother in town was somebody's warden, but Mrs. Whitlock made caramel popcorn and let us stay up for the late movie, which is why the rule never made sense to me. If she calls your name after midnight, don't answer. Why would your mom call me at midnight? Danny just looked at me the way you look at someone who's about to learn something you wish you didn't know. She won't, he said. That's the point. That night we watched the movie. We ate the popcorn. Mrs. Whitlock said goodnight at 10, and her bedroom door clicked shut down the hall. Ordinary. All of it, completely ordinary. I woke up because someone was saying my name. Soft. Patient. Right at the crack of the bedroom door. Michael. Michael, honey. Come to the kitchen. I made you something. Mrs. Whitlock's voice. Exactly her voice. The caramel popcorn warmth of it. My leg was already out of the sleeping bag when Danny's hand clamped onto my arm, so hard it left marks. He didn't say anything. He just shook his head, slow, and mouthed the words, count to 30. The voice kept going while I counted. That's the part one still dream about. It didn't get angry. It got better. By the time I reached 20, it had my mother's disappointment in it. That little pause she does before my name when I've let her down. At 30, it stopped, like a radio switching off. I didn't sleep. At some point I whispered, Danny, what is that? He was staring at the ceiling. Dad says it came up from the reservoir the winter the radio station closed. He said it the way you'd recite a fact for school, something worn smooth from repeating. It doesn't have a voice of its own. So it borrows. Borrows how? It listens. He turned and looked at me then. It's been listening to my mom for 6 years. It has her perfect now. It's working on my dad. A pause. It only calls you by name once it's decided it wants you specifically. I lay there in the dark doing the math on that sentence until the sun came up. Here's where I tell you the thing I've never told anyone. 2 weeks later, my parents were arguing about money after dinner, and the house felt small, so I did a stupid 11-year-old thing. I got angry that nobody understood me, and I wished, out loud, into my pillow, that I lived anywhere else. That night, at 3:11 in the morning, something called my name from downstairs, in my own house, on the other side of town. My mother's voice. Michael, come down, sweetheart. I want to show you something. And I want you to understand, I almost went. Because I was 11, and I'd been crying, and it had exactly the voice a kid wants to hear when he's sad. It said all the right things. It had clearly been listening to my house for longer than one night. But it made one mistake. My mother never called me Michael. Not once in my life. She called me Mikey or Michael Ray when I was in trouble. Never just Michael. It had learned her voice. It hadn't learned her. I counted to 30. Then I counted to 100. Then I counted until my alarm went off. And at breakfast my mother, my real mother, calling me Mikey, burning the toast, asked why I looked like I hadn't slept. I never slept at Danny's again. We stayed friends the way you do, quieter every year, than just a name in a yearbook. I moved away at 18 and I did not look back at Hollow Creek. And if you've heard tape number 1, you know moving away from this town doesn't mean much. The town keeps your file open. Last month, I came back for Danny's funeral. 43. His heart, they said. At the reception, in the church basement with the bad coffee, Mrs. Whitlock found me. She's small now, and gray, but the caramel warmth is still in her voice, and I hated that I flinched at it. She held my hand in both of hers, and said she was glad I came. And then she leaned in, and I swear the room went cold, and she said, "You were always such a good boy, Michael. You never answered. We used to wonder," and here she smiled, the way you smile at a memory, which one of you it would follow home. I drove out of Hollow Creek that night, doing 70 on a road marked 40. I live 600 miles away now. Third floor apartment. Good locks. Last Tuesday, at 3:11 in the morning, my phone rang. My mother's number. My mother's voice. She called me Michael. I'm not going to tell you whether I answered, but I'll tell you what I heard in the background of that call, just underneath her voice, patient as ever, a radio, tuned to static. This is tape number 2. Keep counting to 30, Hollow Creek. It's still learning. Michael left town. It didn't matter. The town keeps your file open. Years later, a records clerk found out exactly where those files are kept and what was filed under his own name. This is tape 3, the last one we have, for now. In the basement of the Hollow Creek County building, on a shelf marked "No Circulating," there are 3 recordings sealed in wax paper and red tape. The label on each one says the same thing. Do not play. Do not transcribe. Do not log. I know the handwriting. It's mine. My name is Harold Voss. For 31 years I was the records clerk for Hollow Creek County, which is a job you take when you like paper more than people, and I did, and I'm not ashamed of it. Deeds, ledgers, school photos, water samples. If it happened in this town, it crossed my desk, and I filed it where it belonged. My wife used to say I'd file the weather if they let me. She died in the spring of '02. After that I started staying late, because the annex was quiet, but it wasn't empty, if you understand the difference. A building full of voices on paper. Some nights I'd play the old tape reels while I worked. Council meetings. School concerts. It was company. That's the part you need to understand about me, because it's the reason everything else happened. I like the voices. In October of 2003, the county finally cleared out the WKHC building, the radio station. It had been sitting dead on the Reservoir Road since 1986, 17 years of pigeons and rot, and when the demolition order went through, everything inside came to me. For boxes, mostly water-damaged nothing, transmitter manuals, a coffee mug, and the reels. 51 reels of broadcast tape, and I cataloged every one of them, and 48 of them are exactly what they say they are. A farm report, a church hour, a high school football game from 1984 that Hollow Creek lost, which sounds about right. This is a story about the other 3. Entry 1. The broadcast log. Not a tape, at first. A binder. WKHC kept a transmitter log, power readings signed every night by the engineer on duty, and the last page is dated June 9, 1986, the day the station died. Final sign-off, 11:04 p.m. Transmitter cold. A man named Dale Sumner signed it, and his signature is steady as a ruler. Except the log doesn't stop there. There are 6 more weeks of entries. Same binder, same column, no signatures. Power draw at the transmitter, log nightly, always at the same time. 3:11 a.m. A dead station, unplugged, pulling power in the dark. I showed it to a county engineer in '04, and he said meter fault happens all the time, and I wrote meter fault on the folder because I wanted that to be true. You'd have done the same. That's how this town works. We have a drawer for everything, and the drawer is labeled explainable. Entry 2. The call-in tape. Reel 49 is the last hour of live broadcast WKHC ever did. June 9th, 1986. Dale Sumner, the night host, taking calls about nothing. Road work. A lost dog. And then at the end, one caller who doesn't say hello. The voice just says, "Dale, come down to the water. We've been practicing you." And here is the thing I have never said out loud, not to anyone. The caller's voice is Dale Sumner's voice. Both sides of that phone call are the same man. One of them is confused and getting angry, and the other one is patient. Patient the way water is patient. Dale signed the transmitter log steady as a ruler that night, locked the building, and 9 days later they pulled his truck out of the reservoir shallows with the driver's door open. The county road accident. We have a drawer for that too. I had a clerk under me back then. Ruthie called her. Sweet, stubborn, wore headphones so I wouldn't know she listened to music on shift. In March of 2004 she found Reel 49 before I'd sealed anything, and she transcribed it, because transcription was her job and I hadn't told her not to. She came to my desk, white as the paper. She said, "Mr. Voss," at the end of the tape, after the caller hangs up. She said, "It says my name." I played that reel start to finish that same night. It ends with dead air and the click of the board shutting down. There's no name on it. There never was, until she listened alone. Ruthie gave notice in April. She told people she was moving to her sister's in Ohio. 3 weeks later, a fisherman found her car parked at the reservoir turnout, doors locked, seats empty, and her headphones sitting on the dock the way you'd set down something you meant to come back for. She was 26. I signed her personnel file into storage myself, and I am telling you her name because somebody who isn't a drawer in my basement should remember it. Entry 3. 2 days after they stopped dragging the reservoir for Ruthie, I went through every WKHC box again, angry, the way you get angry at furniture. I wanted a reason. And at the bottom of box 4, under the transmitter manuals I had already cataloged twice, there was a 50-second reel. I had counted 51. Twice. The box was typed like all the others, WKHC, quarter-inch tape, and there was a date on the label. The date was 3 days away, the following Friday. And under the date, in the space-marked program, someone had typed, Voss, Harold, evening. I want to tell you I burned it. I want to tell you I drove it to the reservoir and threw it in, except nothing that goes into that water stays there. We've established that. I played it. It's my kitchen. You can hear my kettle, the bad hinge on my cabinet, a chair creaking the way mine creaks. And you can hear me, humming, and I only ever hummed when Marion was alive. And then a woman's voice, close to the microphone, a voice that had been dead for 2 years, says, Harold, you left the radio on. The recording is 52 minutes long. I listened to the end. I shouldn't have listened to the end. That Friday I sat in my kitchen with every light on and the radio unplugged, and nothing happened. No kettle, no voice. Saturday, nothing. I'm an old man filing weather, I thought. And years went by, and I retired, and I sealed all 3 of those entries in wax paper and red tape with my own hands, against every regulation I ever enforced, because some things should not be transcribed by a 26-year-old wearing headphones. But you deserve the ending, so here it is. Last month I got the reel out one more time. Don't ask me why. I like the voices. I told you that at the start, and I told you it was the reason everything happened. The tape is 54 minutes now. It was 52. The new part is mostly quiet. A room at night. And at the very end, just before the tape runs out, there's a sound I know the way I know my own signature. The bat hinge. My cabinet. Opening, slow, in a kitchen where I live alone. The date on the label has changed too. It says tonight. So this is tape number 3, and I'm recording it at my kitchen table with the cabinet nailed shut, which I understand is not how hinges work. If you take one thing from a records clerk with 31 years of service, take this. If you ever find a recording with your name on it, look at the date first. And if the date hasn't happened yet, you burn it. You don't listen to the end. I listen to the end. That's the whole file. 3 tapes. 1 town. 1 thing under the water that learns voices and is still learning. If you made it this far without answering anything, you did better than most of Hollow Creek. Sleep well. Keep the radio off.